Nation from the First Nations in Canada, and she is a human rights activist who focuses on missing and murdered women in Canada, especially the missing and murdered Aboriginal women. At last count from the RCMP, it was over 1,100 missing and murdered Aboriginal women in Canada. Gladys has started the Walk for Justice and has recently began an organization, Tears for Justice, which is used to raise awareness about this problem. So please help me welcome Gladys Radek.
Good morning. My name is Gladys Radek, and I'm originally from the Gitxsan-Wet'suwet'en territory, northern British Columbia. My birthplace is Morristown, BC, which is in the heart of the Highway of Tears. My ultimate goal is to raise awareness about the missing and murdered women, not only along the Highway of Tears, but also across Canada, which is why I formed the organizations Walk for Justice and Tears for Justice. First of all, I'd like to read a piece that I wrote. The picture that you see on my left here is a picture of my niece. Her name is Tamara Lynn Chipman, and she disappeared from the Highway of Tears on September 21st, 2005. Tamara was my brother's only natural daughter, and she was also a young mother of a 2.5-year-old boy when she disappeared. Today, 9 years and 3 months later, she still remains missing. This piece is called Vanish. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down. Through a mother's womb, another baby girl is born. Much TLC has taken her spunky character, wins the hearts of her large extended family. She soon becomes the apple of Grandma's eye as she grows faster than the hair on her head. If nobody knew where she was, we always knew that she was with Grandpa at their usual table at the West End restaurant, where all the boys would hang out and teasing her because of her bald little head and a huge smile with twinkling eyes. Grandpa would fiercely defend her when they called her a boy. Her hair eventually turned out into curly little locks of brown at the age of 4. She grew up holding Grandpa's stories in her heart, and he passed away when she was very young, but she never forgets. TLC loves her daddy too. She stole his heart from the moment she was born. Even her mom knew she would always be Daddy's girl forever. With the loss of her grandpa, she clung to her daddy, became his little shadow. She loves fishing boats, fast cars, dogs, and led an adventurous outdoor life in northern Canada. She was never afraid of anything. Lived life to the fullest, and she grew into a tall, lanky, charming, beautiful young lady, and eventually a mother, with a smile that would brighten everybody's day. She blossomed from being Daddy's little tomboy to a young mother at age 19. They say there's no pain greater than a mother giving birth. The greatest pain is living the fear of losing that child after giving birth. Should the truth be told, TLC's greatest fear was realized when she had her little boy. She feared ever losing him. They bonded forever and more. Grandpa once again has the twinkle in his eye as he envelopes her heart with his little grandson, a spitting image of his once little TLC, and yet another wonderful addition of our already extended large family. This child too shall be loved, cherished, and valued by all of us. We all share stories about how the antics of our babies reflect on us when we were young. We laugh at the way our children are an extension of us and bring us so much joy. Then, just out of the blue, something out of the ordinary happens. There is no phone calls, no knock on the door, no cheery hello. No more, hey daddy, what are we going to do today? All of a sudden our world came crashing down. Nobody has heard from TLC. A few days go by and it slowly turns into weeks, a month, and then into years. Her disappearance created so much pain in our family as we resort to search parties through the mountains, along the railway tracks, in ditches and culverts, and tread through the back alleys of the communities where angels wouldn't dare tread. We have searched local, provincial, national, and international waters for our baby girl, only to realize that there were so many more. The heartbreaking reality is that Canada has a dark little secret. That little secret is the overwhelming number of missing and murdered women and children in this country that nobody wants to acknowledge. When TLC disappeared, it was time to take some serious actions to raise awareness about her and the well over 4,000 missing and murdered women across this country in the past 4 decades. Heartbreaking reality is that at least 70 of these victims were Aboriginal or First Nations descent, whichever term you choose to refer to Indigenous people of Canada at this time. National walks and raising awareness campaigns were brought to life by groups of grassroots activists in Vancouver, BC, Canada. These grassroots activists are the frontline workers who have dedicated their lives to the most vulnerable people in society, those who have fallen victim to all forms of violence, sexual assaults, childhood trauma, residential school survivors, exploitation, prostitution, and drug and alcohol addictions. These frontline workers have been mopping up the blood of our women 365 days a year, 24/7, 7 days a week. No forms of violence take days off. First call of action was to demand a national public inquiry. Our gracious Prime Minister honored our walkers by sending out a House of Parliament representative, who in turn told us he would ensure appropriate steps would be taken to follow our documented demands. Absolutely no follow-up from the Prime Minister's office since then. TLC is the first thought every morning as we wonder where she is. The pain of not knowing leaves a huge hole in our hearts. The eternal flame will continue to burn in the hopes that someday soon she will bound through that door and say, "Hey Daddy, what are we going to do today?" Instead we wonder, is she warm? Is she safe? Is she alive? Is she being held against her will? Is she being raped or tortured? Is she being bought or sold? What happened to her? Is she dead? Somewhere out there, somebody knows something. Prayers, someday they will come forward and tell us the truth. This thought runs through the minds of all the families of our missing loved ones. There are virtually thousands of us who wake up to this nightmare every single day. So many people out there using our loved ones' names and pictures for their own benefits. Organizations claiming that they are there for the families, yet fail to contact the family who is in mourning. Lawyers lining their pockets through the judicial process that is protecting the rights of over 60 serial killers here in Canada, above the rights of the women and the thousands of children left behind, who have fallen prey to this dysfunctional and corrupt system. The Government of Canada as a whole has the responsibility of ensuring each and every citizen is protected by law by way of implementing the United Declaration of Human Rights to everyone. We are also, or should be, protected by law through the Public and Safety Minister, from the top levels of government to the Attorney Generals and the Solicitor Generals provincially. Through the serious flaws, beginning with the police, the judicial system as a whole, and the lack of concern for even one woman to go missing or be murdered creates a distrust with the families. Few resources are made available to the families when their searches continue into years and decades. No resources available for that family to heal from their broken hearts. Most hurtful is the racism displayed when our First Nations loved ones disappear. Things like oh, is she First Nations? Or I heard she was a party animal. Or was she wanted by the cops? Or the pet peeve of all being that she lived a high-risk lifestyle. The latter could mean anything from prostitution, addiction, to hitchhiking, neither of which pertain to TLC or the many other young girls and mothers who have simply disappeared. The stigma with the media stating all our First Nations girls and women with this label has hindered mainstream society that all our women and girls are just that, prostitutes, addicts, and hitchhiking, thus not worthy of searching for. For other ethnic groups, the media portrays them in a totally different light, that they were exceeding in school, popular, loved, valued, and missed. Racism also dominated the widely publicized trial of the public inquiry, leading us into the recommendations of the document called Forsaken. Robert Picton. Corruption and cover-up riddled the process right from the beginning. And today, for 49 plus victims, their family, and the 78 children's lives who were directly affected by this severed system will never get the justice they so richly deserve. Yes, it is admitted that many dropped the ball, and that high lifestyle and racism played a significant role in the decisions. But this system failed to address proper accountability from any of those officers, and the many files remain sealed so as not to implicate the many high-profile witnesses who either knew or participated at the notorious Piggy's Palace. Many don't realize that the women and girls did not stop going missing or being murdered after the arrest of Robert Picton. Canada's prison system boasts of 60 serial killers that we, the taxpayers, are housing at this time. Each of them that get 3 square meals a day, a roof over their heads, hydro, heat, clean laundry, full benefits of health care, education, counseling, phone, computer, drugs, and protective custody, and secure 24/7. All of these women and children struggle for every day. What will it take to turn this system around? It makes sense to me that all our women and girls should be treated with the same respect as that of the Prime Minister's mother, wife, daughter, or niece. What would he do if it was one of his family members were to simply vanish? Those were the feelings that I wrote to Tamara just a couple of years ago. At this time, I would like to show you a video that was one of the very first videos that I made when I started on this trail of organizing walks for the missing and murdered women from the Highway of Tears, and then eventually started collecting a database for all across Canada. I stopped counting in 2011 because it was getting too hard for me emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And I stopped counting at 4,232 missing and murdered women. A video was made, that was the first part of my journey 9 years ago, in 3 months. That's how long my niece has been missing.
When she went missing, it tore a piece of our hearts. And it didn't take long to realize that Tamara wasn't the only one that was missing from our community. The billboard that you saw there is right outside our community. And we demanded that billboard so that we could raise awareness. It was one of the recommendations that were made at the Highway of Tears Symposium that they had in Prince George, BC. They have 33 recommendations that the families made at that symposium. And here we are 9 years later, and they've failed to implement all the other recommendations. The government has failed us miserably. We even had to pay for our own billboard to raise awareness. Also, since then, there's been at least 100 more other girls that have gone missing from that territory, just on the Highway of Tears. I was living in Vancouver when Tamara went missing. And it was really heartbreaking for me because I also have 4 daughters. And I have a son. I have 4 grandbaby girls and 2 grandsons. And a protective mode came over me, and I wanted to do something to raise awareness. I went to the Downtown Eastside Women's Center in Vancouver to search for help. And there I met a young lady. Her name is Bernie Williams. She's a grassroots activist. She's been in the Downtown East Side for decades, mopping up the blood of the women that were going missing and being murdered in the Downtown East Side. Her mother and 3 sisters were also murdered in the Downtown East Side, and today all of those cases remain unsolved. She was a family member. When I started organizing the walks, Bernie Williams and myself knew many, many family members who had lost loved ones in the Downtown East Side, in BC, and across Canada. So we knew that this was not just a one-time thing. There was something seriously happening here in Canada, and women were disappearing nationwide, and it appears that nobody seems to want to do anything about it, which is why we organized the walks. We want a national public inquiry. The reason we want the national public inquiry is because we want a national action plan through the voices of the families and what could be done to protect our women and children and men. There is a database out there right now with over 700 Aboriginal men that are also missing across this country. And those cases also remain unsolved. I have friends of mine that are out in the UK whose sons are missing. I have friends of mine across this country whose sons are missing. From the Highway of Tears, I speak about Luke Degernes. He was 14 years old and he disappeared from Prince George. And today his mother searches for him. The violence that has been entailed with these serial killers. I attended the Robert Pickton trial in its entirety. I also attended the public inquiry forsaken in its entirety. I was there as a support for the families. I've heard thousands of stories right across this nation about young women and girls who have gone missing. I hear the pain of the families, and those families are the ones that were all the volunteers that helped us walk across this country. We did Walk for Justice in 2008, and we walked from Vancouver to Ottawa, and that was our demand. We wanted to see the Prime Minister, and we wanted to deliver him a list of the names that we would compile. In that year, we delivered 2,937 names. And the Prime Minister, being the coward that he was, did not come out. Our chiefs were there. Jack Layton was there. And the Prime Minister's office sent out a representative. In 2009, we walked from Vancouver to Prince Rupert, BC, to honor those women from the Highway of Tears. At that time, I had 44 names on my list, and the RCMP had 18. In 2010, we walked from Kamloops to Winnipeg to complete the Highway 16, which is what they tried to include as the Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears is predominantly a stretch of highway from northern BC, Prince Rupert, BC to Prince George, 734 kilometer stretch. And women, like I say, continue to go missing today. And there's a lot of them that aren't in the media, but there's still search parties out there for them. In 2011, we walked again because we didn't see any progress happening for the National Public Inquiry, and we walked again from Vancouver to Ottawa. Once again, the Prime Minister refused to come out. And then in 2013, I changed the organization to Tears for Justice. And we walked from Membertou, Nova Scotia to Prince Rupert, BC. All these walks were walked in a leapfrog fashion, and they were all family members who had lost their loved ones. We relied totally on donations and volunteer. Every stop that we made, we got new pictures. We got new statistics from those communities. We got new stories. But the one thing that really, really stuck out with us was that these families wanted a national public inquiry. We need a national action plan to protect women and children so that they're not plucked off those streets. Right now, right in the heart of this country in Winnipeg, I get notices on Facebook pages and my Google alerts about women that are going missing. Right now, Winnipeg is a hot spot. I'm picking up a new woman every day that has gone missing from there, and the majority of them remain unsolved. I was given a book that told me about the over 60 serial killers in Canada that we're housing. This is Harper's idea of dealing with the violence against our women, is housing the serial killers. And what people really don't talk about is that a vast majority of the women that are going missing and being murdered are also young mothers. Talk about Georgina Papin. Georgina Papin was a victim of Robert Pickton. And the only thing that they found of her was her finger. They found the DNA. and they found her finger. She had 7 children. And what happened to those children? Well, those children ended up being put into foster care, and they were spread out between Canada and the United States. And when we found her finger, and we did a ceremony for her in Vancouver acknowledging her death, they could only find 2 of her kids. And just recently they found a 3rd child who was down in the States. And she didn't even know. And this child is a young mother now. But it was heartbreaking for her to find out that her mother, her children's grandmother, was murdered by a serial killer in Canada. I think about Claudette Osborne, who went missing out of Winnipeg. She was a young mother of 4. She had a baby 2 weeks before she disappeared. The strength of her family truly amazed me when I think about what they've done to raise awareness about Claudette and all of our other missing and murdered women. Her sister, and if you get a chance to check her out, her name is Bernadette Smith. Her mother's name is Brenda Osborne. But they organize every year a concert for the families of the missing and murdered women in Winnipeg. It's called No Stones Unturned. It's a free concert for the family members, and it's there to raise awareness. Bernadette Smith was also the one that had the authorities in Winnipeg to drag the Red River. And the last count that I received when they started dragging that river is they found 9 bodies of missing and murdered women in the Red River. That's what she's done to raise awareness and to raise the bar. All of these young women and girls were accused of being prostitutes, drug addicts, society's throwaways. It's not right. Racism has been very prevalent. We faced racism when we were walking, especially between Calgary and Regina. We actually had doors for the gas stations closed in our faces because they didn't want those Indians in there. We were kicked out of a campground by a group of graduates, actually. They were all white, and they threatened us. We had 3 vehicles that were filled with pictures of missing and murdered women, and they were ready to attack us with their beer bottles. It was really scary. As a human rights activist, I had no idea I was going to be a human rights activist. When I was 44 years old, I decided I wanted to graduate. So I did graduate in 1999, and that's when I realized exactly who I was, because I've been institutionalized all my life. I moved into an apartment complex in Vancouver. It was native housing, and it was obviously native housing because we had a great big mask carved in the front of our building. And across the street from us, there was a high-end mall that they had just built the year before. When we moved into that apartment building, the security guards in that mall made a practice of kicking Aboriginal people out and poor people out of that mall. And I put up with it for about 6 months. And one day, the very same security guard that had been harassing me for 6 months came and followed up behind me and asked me what I was doing in the mall. She said, "What are you doing here? Where are you going?" She just questioned me and treated me like I was a common criminal. And yet she knew my face, because I'd been there every day. I loved Starbucks coffee, and there was a Starbucks coffee there. So So my girlfriend and I were walking in there, and when she did that day, I just had enough. So I stopped right there in my tracks. I said, why are you doing this to me? Why are you treating me like a criminal? She was following me so close and wanted me out of there so badly that she bumped into me. Because she wanted me out of that mall. At that point in May 2001, I'd had enough. And what I did was I phoned the police. And I told them, I said, they have racist practices in this mall. And I want something done about it. And that police officer looked at me and said, oh, he said, you're making this into a racist issue? And he pointed at himself and he says, well, I'm racist. I said, pardon me? And he pointed at himself again. He said, I am racist. I said, okay. I said, that's enough. What he didn't know was that my white boyfriend was sitting 3 feet away from me listening to this conversation. And my boyfriend jumped up and he asked the police officer for his badge number. And he told him, he said, you know what? He said, I heard everything you said to her. And he said, well, I want your badge number. And we are going to take this to the BC Civil Liberties Union. And we did. It took me 4 years to go after Tinseltown Mall and the security and to prove systemic racism for the first time ever in Canada through BC Human Rights Tribunal. And I won that lawsuit. First thing the lawyer did was ask me, how much money do you want, Gladys? I don't want money. I want to go after the policy that gives them the right to kick our people out of this mall. I want to go after the policy of those security guards. And I want to ensure that their handwritten policy is no longer going to be allowing them to kick our people out of that mall. The downtown east side is Canada's poorest postal code. They have well over 5,000 homeless people that utilize that mall for the services that they offered. So I did sue them. And I told them, I said, well, you need a number? I said, 15,000. And he looked at me, he started laughing. He said, I don't know that you'll get that much. He said, because the highest award ever given is $2,500 for injury to dignity. I said, I don't care. I said, I told you I don't want the money. At the end of the day, I won the full $15,000. It was the highest award ever given. And I donated it back to the community that I was living in, and I helped people out. But I got what I wanted. And right now in BC, it is mandatory for all security guards to take a human rights module in their security courses before they can be handed their shields. So they need to have that module. It's mandatory for them to have that module before they can even become security guards. They have to have awareness about human rights. I brought in the UN Declaration. This is another thing that's affecting our missing and murdered women, is the lack of care in implementing the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. I got into a huge argument with Amnesty International in regards to that. Because what they have here in Canada is they have 2 sets of laws. And as far as I'm concerned, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights means all. Universal, that means everybody. But here in Canada, they have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And they also have another set of laws, it's called the Universal Declaration for Indigenous Human Rights, thus separating us from them. I don't agree with that. As far as I'm concerned, everybody has the right to life, whether it be in Canada, whether it be anywhere in fight really hard to fight for the human rights of all these family members who are missing their loved ones. This time I would like to know if there's any questions. I do have a Facebook page. It's called Tears for Justice, Tears number 4 Justice. And what we do on there is we tell the family stories, and we're also organizing another walk for next year. This is on the insistence of my oldest walker, who's 80 years old this year. She's walked with us every year. And what we're doing is we do have a postcard online on the Tears for Justice page, and we would like to have people print them out, hand them out, and sign them and send them into the Prime Minister's office. On that postcard is the demand for a national public inquiry, also the demand for a national action plan to be implemented to protect women. We're also asking for cultural and healing and wellness centers to be resourced so that we can prevent further instances of violence against all women. But the postcard, once they're printed out and everything, they can be sent, and it's no postage stamp necessary, because anything that's sent to the Prime Minister's office doesn't need a stamp. So what we need to do is we need to bombard them with our demand for a national public inquiry. Also, if you like, I know that when it comes to speaking about violence, when it comes to speaking about women that are being raped, even men that are being raped, nobody wants to talk about it. If you know something is happening to your friend, help them. Help them out. If you know that somebody is violating a woman, stop that person. Report it to the authorities. I worry about students especially, because this is a culture that nobody talks about in the universities and colleges. There are women getting raped, there are women getting killed, especially at universities and colleges. It's not okay. Violence is not okay under any circumstances. You have to learn how to respect your women. Our women are the life givers of society. Without us women, the men wouldn't be here. We have to treat them as sacred. We're the only ones that can give birth to children. And the men need us, and we need the men also to create that balance. And we also know that violence also affects men. We know that men are being raped. We know that men are also being killed. We also know that men are disappearing. But we need to talk about it. We need to report it. We need to help that person that's being violated, because quite often what happens when a person, as myself, I was raised in a very violent childhood. I've been institutionalized since birth, and I was raped as a child as well. You have to report it. You have to do something about it at that time. Up here in Canada, we're kind of lucky in one way, is that we do have historical sexual abuse that can be reported, unlike the States. You heard about Bill Cosby and all those women that have claimed that he sexually abused all these women. Down in the States, their laws will not allow those women to come forward and charge them. But up here in Canada, we can. So if something happened to your friend 20 years ago, you can still charge them. You can still charge the perpetrators. Those perpetrators need to be put away.
thank Gladys Radek one more time for coming and speaking to us here. This week is marked as Human Rights Week. Remember, there's always room for human rights and we should all be activists all the time.